You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 8th Doctor Big Finish audio story, The Creed of the Kromon. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around. We have more of your great listener feedback at the end of the show. And remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on X, where we're at SQPN, and be sure to leave us comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'll share it as feedback in a future episode. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, because if you like Secrets of Doctor Who and you like Doctor Who the series, you're probably a Stargate fan, so you should definitely check out The Secrets of Stargate wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Stargate. And you can check out our brand new website, which looks awesome. So, we're talking about The Creed of the Kromon. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in this story?
This week, we have a big 2-hour audio adventure. Picking up at the end of Scherzo, the 8th Doctor and Charley are searching for the TARDIS, and they enter a new zone on the planet that they're on in the Divergent Universe. This zone is a big red desert that has several intelligent races, but they're ruled by an alien group of termite-like aliens called the Kromon, who took their creed from a nameless company's corporate business culture. The Kromon are extremely dependent on water, and they're causing the zone to become a desert by channeling all the water into their biospheres. The Doctor and Charley meet a chameleon-like gentleman named Kariz, who the Kromon had drugged and were preparing to hybridize to make one of their royals, together with his wife Lyda. But Kariz's body rejected the elixir they gave him, and he fled into the wasteland. They also meet an Orog, an intelligent underground burrower like a mole man. However, they are captured by the Kromon, and in the Kromon biosphere, Kariz finds Lyda, who has been hideously transformed into a hybrid breeder queen. She begs Kariz to kill her, and he shoots her dead with a laser gun. Afterwards, the group is recaptured by the Kromon. For killing the queen, Kariz is sentenced to be executed on a water wheel that will slowly drown him, while Charley is sent to become a new hybrid breeder queen, and the Doctor is assigned to help the Kromon develop space travel technology. Charley and the Doctor are given drugs to alter their minds and make them willing slaves, but the Doctor resists his conditioning and builds a bomb that kills the Kromon Directorate. Meanwhile, the Orug, who had been assigned to dig, returns and helps Kariz escape from the water wheel. After meeting up with the Doctor, the three go into hiding to figure out how to help Charley. The Orug reveals that he broke free of Kromon control with the help of another underground race, the Salandas, who showed him which roots and minerals to eat to counteract the Kromon drugs. The Doctor sends the Orug to use these to liberate the others of his tribe and then attack the Kromon water distribution system. That allows him, Kariz, and the Orug to find Charley, who is completely under Kromon mental domination and has been hideously transformed. Kariz insists that they kill her, but the Doctor feeds her the roots and minerals instead, and she eventually returns to normal. The Orug also have led similar rebellions against the other Kromon biospheres, and Kariz has freed his people. With nothing left for him here, he then accompanies the Doctor and Charley into the next zone in quest of the TARDIS. The end.
All right. So, your overall impression of this one, Jimmy?
Well, I thought it was fine. It was, I'd read some reviews that were pretty negative about it and said it just dragged and dragged, but I didn't find it that way. I mean, I thought there were a few parts where it was a little bit slow, but this was a fascinating world-building exercise they had. I mean, they've got basically 3 main races, and really there's a 4th. But because there's another character I didn't mention in my summary called the Croca, who's kind of the guardian, giving people access to different zones. And he's only at the beginning and the end of the story, so I didn't really mention him. But this is a fascinating exercise in world building, and I thought it kept pace. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, so it picks up from the end of the
Scherzo.
last story, Scherzo, which was, you know, Charley and the Doctor ending up in this weird space, sans TARDIS, undergoing experimentation, and it's from the end of that when they come out into this interzone, and then they try to enter another zone, which is called the zone of Eutermes, which is where they encounter
and
the
that's
Kromon and the rest.
That's what Carries is. He's a Eutermesan.
And so you mentioned the Croca is this character they encounter in this interzone, and says at some point, out of hearing of the Doctor and Charley, that they're experimenting on them. They're being experimented on, that's what happened in Scherzo. This is going to happen in this one, and it's going to continue into the next one. In this arc of, I think it's 8 stories, I think they said, in the Divergent Universe, something along those lines. A number of stories. So, yeah, it's the second of 8 stories set in the Divergent Universe. We don't know how they got there, though, which is interesting. I wonder if we ever find out. Have you listened to these, all of these?
I haven't listened to all of them. Not yet.
Okay.
But I was interested in this one because here we pick up Carries, and he's a new companion. He goes on for some time, and he's even name-checked in Night of the Doctor. When the 8th Doctor is regenerating, he's holding up the chalice that's going to transform him, and he gives a verbal salute to his companions. He mentions Charley, and he mentions Carries, and he mentions several others. So Carries has been TV canonized, and he seems like a very interesting character. One of the things that the Croca says to the Doctor at the end, he notes that they're bringing Carries with them into a new zone, and the Doctor says, "You got a problem with that?" And Croca says, "No, not me. I don't have any problem with that, but you might. Have you noticed the way the Orug were so deferential to him? It's because he's a monk, and we'll later find out what he's a monk of, but he's a monk, and so he's dedicated to peace, and yet he killed his wife, and he wanted to kill Charley." And the Doctor says, "Yeah, because he was so horrified at what the Kromon had done to them." And Croca says, "Are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't you that changed him?" And so we've got an interesting character arc set up for Carries in terms of the tension between his peaceful background and his new willingness to use violence. And so that should be interesting to explore. My only complaint is the scriptwriters don't know how to use apostrophes. It's like in Stargate SG-1 where Teal'c has an apostrophe in the middle of his name just because it looks cool, even though it has no phonetic value. And we've got something similar going on here. When you use an apostrophe in standard interlinguistic orthography, it either stands for something like a glottal stop or a short vowel or something like that. His name is spelled C''Rizz. So that should be pronounced something like Cariz. But instead, they've turned the apostrophe into a completely unwritten long vowel, Cariz.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. And similarly, his wife's name, Lyda, is spelled L'Da. It ought to be Lida or Elda or something like that. But they've, again, inserted a long vowel for that apostrophe, and it's Lyda. What is going on with this crazy apostrophe nonsense? If you want to have cool apostrophes in your alien names, do it right.
Likewise, Croca has KRO apostrophe KA.
Yeah, it's like there's you don't need that apostrophe.
Just call him Croca, KROKA.
Yeah.
But that makes him alien. Yeah. And for folks who's like, how do you know that these are spelled this way in an audio story? Well, it's
it's in the support materials, which are taken from the scripts.
Exactly. So the Doctor and Charley have to kind of force their way through this interzone, and in fact, they only get through when the Croca allows them. So they're under his control throughout it. So that's kind of an interesting. And he kind of torments Charley a little bit at first.
Mm-hmm. He makes her remember the R101 disaster.
Yeah, which is and also like they feel like they get insects or something all over them, and that sort of thing. So he's certainly not a good character, good person in what they're trying to do. But they need to justify themselves to him to get into the zone of Eutermes, he says. There's very much an adversarial aspect here. So we don't know how the Doctor lost the TARDIS. We just know that the TARDIS is missing. We started without the TARDIS, so that's kind of interesting. I think the Kromon are kind of an interesting species themselves because they're described as being like termites, giant termites who are sentient and speak in English for our sake, and
the TARDIS is translating it all.
Yes, wherever the TARDIS is, it's doing its job still, and they've modeled their civilization as a colony species. Termites are like ants and bees. They are a social colony species. That's how they organize themselves. But modeled themselves after this alien concept of corporation with all that entails. It reminds me a little bit of Star Trek's A Piece of the Action, where a book about the 1920s New York gangsters contaminates this world of highly imitative humanoids, and they model their civilization on 1920s gangsters in New York City.
Was Chicago gangsters, but
it might have been. But in any case, it's kind of seems like reminds me of that, and it's almost a commentary on corporate culture these days. You have a lot of discussion of you're in violation of policies and protocols and that sort of thing in the midst of the horrific stuff going on. So I found that an interesting overlay on a story of aliens.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too because the title of the play, The Creed of the Kromons, makes you think it's going to be religious, and their creed is actually just corporate policy. There's nothing religious about it.
Well, maybe that in itself is a commentary on how corporate policy can become like a religion in some bad cases. So in fact, at one point they take the Doctor because they don't have a concept of outer space or space. Well, they have an idea that there might be more space, but everything in the interzone is sort of planetary surface. There's these zones.
Yeah, they apparently came from another planet, and then so their backstory is they came from another planet. It was a very wet planet, which they needed, and then the company, no one remembers its name. The company came in an alien ship and colonized it, and eventually they dug in and they cooperated. They were subjugated by the company, and it took them 1,000 years. But they learned the company's procedures well enough that they then they enculturated themselves with the company's procedures, and then they rebelled, and they kicked out the company, and they came here and started and effectively replaced the company. They became the company themselves. But no one remembers the original company, and that's going to be one of the big mysteries that we're going to have going forward in this series, because there are a number of things like this red desert, which is what it is now that all the water's been diverted. It's got 2 red suns, and the Doctor learns at one point that the company built one of those 2 red suns. Yeah. So there's ongoing, why would they do that? And so eventually we should have resolution on who this company is that set all this stuff up.
And so they take the Doctor and they make him. They've apparently lost the ability to space travel, and so they're researching it again. And they want the Doctor to build them a spaceship. From a corporate perspective, they make him these amazing offers, like, hey, you could get a share in the corporation and a workspace of your own and a PA, personal assistant or secretary, maybe even become an associate vice president someday. How would that be? It's like,
the Doctor just laughs at him.
Yeah, he says, a share in the corporation. Well, that's different. For horrifically exploiting people. So we have the Utermins, with which Kariz is one of them. We have the Urug,
Uh-huh.
But doesn't get a name, right?
Yeah, he says early on, you could never pronounce my real name, so just call me Urug.
Okay. And I find the Urug interesting in that he has a very urbane, sort of civilized demeanor, and yet is apparently capable of extreme violence and destruction, and apologizes for it whenever he has to let that part of himself out.
He says he feels bad afterwards, yeah. But I like how so the author of this thing is Philip Martin, who also wrote the TV episode Vengeance on Varos, which was a Sixth Doctor story, and it has some themes in common with this. A lot of it takes place, Vengeance of Varos takes place underground, and Perry, the Doctor's companion, has a horrific transformation into a bird woman, where here Charlie has a horrific transformation into a human slug woman, or human termite woman. And so it's got some common themes, but I like how Martin... He's got some nice lines in here that reflect the different characters. Like there's one point after the Orug has come back and liberated Kariz from the water wheel, he takes him to a hidey hole that he's dug for them, and Kariz is complaining a little bit, and he says it's like being buried alive. And the Orug says, "Yes, isn't it wonderful?"
You'd expect a creature that lives primarily underground to enjoy that.
Yeah. There's also a great line where after they've been recaptured and the Kromon are assigning them their fates, they propose turning Charlie into a termite queen. And she objects to this, and the Kromon official says, "Would you prefer execution?" And Charlie, being Charlie, says, "Frankly, yes." and the Kromon says, "Oh, I never encountered a prisoner expressing a preference for execution before."
No one's ever asked for execution. Speaking of Philip Martin, he created the character of Syl and his race of capitalist, profit-obsessed mentors. Yeah, which are a lot like the Star Trek's Ferengi. But it's interesting, how it was a capitalist society and that sort of thing. So he's apparently interested in writing about the corporate overlords and that sort of thing. So it's interesting. So they take the Kromon, capture them, take them to their sphere, and then decide where to put them. They can either be useful for work or be recycled
as fertilizer.
Or
fungus.
Yes. And was it Kariz gets the job? Like they keep putting him in different places where he can help with feeding the Kromon. And it's like the first one is a bunch of
pre-chew their food,
and digest, and and it's all like worms and fungus and stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't have the stomach for that one. How about another job?" They keep finally he ends up like being the lunch lady and delivering via a cart to the different places.
There's also an interesting scene. They don't make anything out of it, but we've been told that you can if you don't get a job, they're going to turn you into fertilizer. And at one point, the Doctor and Charlie are in this fungus growing gallery, and they notice that there's this mud around the base of the funguses. And the Doctor says, "Let's take handfuls of this stuff and throw it as to create a distraction and so forth." And so he and Charlie pick up handfuls of the mud from the base of the fungi, and Charlie says, "What is this stuff?" And the Doctor says, "Never mind." And it's like, okay, that's recycled people.
Yeah,
you've got in your hands, but he's not telling her.
yeah. You don't want to know.
He doesn't. Except he doesn't say you don't want to know. He just says, "Never mind."
Never mind. Yeah. So the Kromon have these liquids, these elixirs that they make people ingest, and one of them pacifies, basically makes you compliant and pacifies you to do whatever. Although it doesn't necessarily work, right? I mean, it doesn't seem to work.
It doesn't work on everybody. It didn't work on Karez because his body rejected it. But it does pacify you. They then have a second and a third elixir that they can give you, and they end up giving these to Charlie. They're not sure, and of course, biologically, this is all nonsense. I mean, it's not going to work on a radically different species from an alien planet. They'd have to adjust the formulas to fit alien biologies. But I'll just assume they're doing that off screen or off mic in this case. But they as they give you progressively more, it puts you in contact with what they call the spirit of the Kromon, which seems to be a kind of like the Borg Queen, only it's a guy. And they don't want to give you more of these elixirs than they have to because it can obliterate your personality. And they're trying to keep the Doctor and Charlie's personalities intact. But they end up, both the Doctor and Charlie end up in mental contact with the spirit of the Kromon, who is like, my will's going to become your will and stuff like that. And that happens in the case of Charlie. It doesn't in the case of the Doctor. And although, we don't know this because he appears to cooperate. He appears to be building them a thing for space flight. He builds them a kind of test device. And then they want to test it, and the Doctor bows out at that moment, and he's and lets the Kromon, his Kromon superior, have the glory of testing this in front of the directorate of the Kromon, and the Doctor, and one of them says to him, "Where are you going?" It's like, "Oh, I don't want to spoil your celebration." It's like, okay, this is going to be a trap. And one of the Kromon is like, okay, well, then I will press the button to activate it. And he presses the button to activate it. Boom. It's like, okay, 8th Doctor, major explosion, kills multiple people. Noted. Remember that, Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah, right. She seems to have forgotten herself. The Doctor uses technobabble at one point to convince the Kromon to give him access to a computer, and then he uses that to make the bomb. I noticed that at one point he talks about time travel, and they say, what is time? They don't recognize the concept of or the word for time, and he says, oh, I mean space travel, slip of the tongue. I thought that was an interesting aspect, that they don't know time, and maybe is that a Divergent Universe thing versus just common to the Kromon. So
I thought it was a writing flaw.
It could be. I'm going to be looking for that and see if that becomes a larger point in the Divergent Universe. So we have this body horror of these humanoids, whether it's Charlie or Lyda, being transformed into termite queens, essentially. Because the Kromon, they're making these hybrids in order to genetically engineer better offspring. To improve the species, obviously, and it's almost like natural selection, but if the insects were sapient, that idea. So they're trying to improve their species, and so we have Karez,
kind of like on the Earthworm Jim show. If you ever saw that, one of the main villains was Queen, pulsating, bloated, festering, sweaty, pus-filled, malformed slug for a butt.
That would be pretty horrific to see.
That's what they're turning Lyda and Charlie into.
Yeah. And so Karez decides to kill Lyda to save her because it can't be undone. At her request, right? And because it can't be undone. And then ever after, he is telling the Doctor, "You need to kill Charlie. You need to kill Charlie." The Doctor's like, "Well, let's hold on that. We'll see. Let's not be rash." But he's really insistent on, we need to kill her. We need to kill her. And in the end, the Doctor is able to, with the help of the Urug's help and the Salanders, to get her back. And I wonder, does Kariz regret killing Lyda? Now it turns out that maybe they could have saved her.
Well, he certainly regretted killing her after he did it, but he felt he had to, and he hadn't really had a chance to reflect on, we were able to get Charlie back.
Yeah. I mean, in this case, let's throw a hypothetical out. Is mercy killing ever acceptable? Like for Lyda? From a moral standpoint?
So killing Lyda to end her suffering would not be morally legitimate. But she's also been turned into a factory to manufacture means of oppression. And so you could potentially kill Lyda in order to end the enemy oppression.
Interesting. Yeah. It's as a unintended side effect that she would die as a result. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not what's going on here. He kills her to end her suffering, which is, according to classic Catholic moral analysis, not legitimate.
So the solution to the Kromon problem is essentially to cut off their water supply, which is what the Arug do. They slurp up so much water. I can tell you the sound design that there's a lot of. If you have misophonia where certain sounds really grate on your nerves, all that Kromon slurping of water is it's gonna get on your nerves a little bit.
By the way, speaking of the sound design, one of the things that I noticed in this is they use like guitar riffs for transitions between scenes, and that's something that they normally don't do in Big Finish. They don't have musical scene transitions, at least not with guitars. I found them, I didn't mind them, but I found them a little intrusive, and whereas normally Big Finish, the incidental music is there, but it's in the background. It doesn't pop the way this did.
Yeah, I wonder if they were trying something new with the direction of this episode. Yeah.
This also was early days in Big Finish, so
2004. Yeah. And you mentioned how long it was, and it was. I mean, I think the overall, including the extras, it was like 2 hours, but it was still like 4 20-something minute episodes.
Yeah,
that they broke it into.
It was like a classic serial.
Yeah, which was longer than what we've been getting from the Eighth Doctor, I think.
Well, it depends on the era of Big Finish. These days, they tend to do lots of 1 hour plays.
Right.
Back in the day, they would do much more. They were modeling it much more after the show. And so they would, for classic Doctors, they would do, like 4-part serials that were 2 hours long.
Yes. Right. They kind of match, they usually match to the Doctor's TV era.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And whereas the Eighth Doctor didn't have a TV era, but he kind of falls in that classic era. I think that's the idea.
Because this is before classics. The new show came on the air.
Yeah, about a year before. That was 2005. So in the end, the Guardian, the Croca, I call him the Guardian because I couldn't remember his name, but I don't want to confuse people with the key to time stuff. But the Croca is back, tells the Doctor that about Kariz and Lyda being regarded as something like symbols that themselves were very symbols of peace, like in themselves, and that the Doctor has made Kariz violent. And as we mentioned, we talked about that earlier. So, and that's where we end as they head into the next zone. So it'll be, and the Croca says, experiment 2.7 complete. Now to begin experiment 3 point something or other. So something's going on. Interesting. Any other notes on this one, Jimmy?
Nope.
All right. Let's get to that feedback I mentioned.
One note. So I noticed another little stupid thing in the write-in, but it's a very minor thing. When they take you to become fertilizer, they want to cremate you. And it's like, no, that's ridiculous. If that's how you make fertilizer, that's going to, what happens in cremation is you burn off all the flesh, and you're left with the bones, which you then pulverize. And so the ashes that people get back from cremation are not really ashes. They're crushed bones that survived the process. But you're destroying a lot of the biological value if you cremate someone rather than compost them.
Yep. Composting is much preferable to the natural method.
And I'm not advocating you do this with humans. I'm just saying if you're an evil termite, composting the human rather than cremating the human is going to get you more bang for your buck when you're fertilizing your fungus.
There you go. That's the new gardening show for termite people.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to our feedback then. And our first feedback is on our episode 286, the 12th Doctor story, Time Heist. So this goes back a couple of years. Joshua Miller, 5133 on YouTube writes, I found on my second watch through the 12th Doctor, I enjoyed more episodes than I had previously. This episode is one of those I enjoyed a lot more. Glad to be able to listen to y'all discuss everything. Well, thank you, Joshua. I enjoyed Time Heist the first time around, I'm pretty sure, because I love caper stories, so like Ocean's 11 sort of stuff. So that was pretty cool. And it's nice to see people are still, coming up new to Secrets of Doctor Who and going back and experiencing some of the other stuff. All of that stuff is available in the various podcast feeds, and a lot of them are on YouTube. So,
and the Peter Capaldi era looks so much better in contrast to what came after it.
Yes. And then on a recent episode 379 on the third Doctor story, Planet of the Daleks, Robert writes on Facebook, this one has an interesting U.S. version that Father Corey might have seen, because episode 3 was only available in black and white until the DVD release. The movie-length version of this story omitted it entirely and cut out a bunch of episode 4 as well. It made for a confusing viewing, but not as bad as the movie version of Invasion of the Dinosaurs, which just starts from the beginning of episode 2 for the same reason. Which one was Invasion of the Dinosaurs? I don't think we've done that yet, have we?
It's a third Doctor story where dinosaurs invade London. And they're really bad.
I can imagine. Early 1970s stop-motion dinosaurs, I'm sure. That should be fun. But, yeah, Father Corey's not here to tell us if he'd seen that version. But I think that may be part of some of the stuff that put me off from Doctor Who when I was a kid, when a few times they stumbled on it. I just was confused a lot of the time, like, what's going on? Like, I don't understand. And it may be that I stumbled on one of these stories where a big chunk was missing out of it. So disservice to the series. And then Robert has another comment, this time on the next episode, the fourth Doctor's The Armageddon Factor. He says, I enjoyed your discussion of Tom Baker companions. With Sarah, Harry, Leela, both Romanas, and K9, the fourth Doctor had an amazing run of companions, which only hit a stumble with John Nathan Turner's insistence on younger and or argumentative companions.
Which happened also right at the end of Tom Baker's run with the introduction in quick succession of Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan.
Yes, and well into the fifth Doctor then. And also I think the Shadow should have been the Decayed Master. Both Guardians picking a renegade Time Lord as their agent would make sense, and if anyone would know the Doctor would pull off getting segments 1 to 5, it would be the Master. I think that could have been interesting, having the Master being the tool of the Black Guardian in that. That would be, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you all for your feedback. Really appreciate it. Now, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Helen O., Kevin R., Suzanne L., Michael S., and Eric R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is also brought to you by Exodus 90 and the Exodus 90 app, a daily companion to help you grow closer to God and to become the man you want to be. This summer, join the Enthronement to the Sacred Heart, the Exodus 90 Summer Book Club, and St. Michael's Lent, beginning August 15th and leading up to the Feast of St. Michael the Archangel on September 29th. Go to exodus90.com/SQPN for a 14-day free trial to the Exodus 90 app and to learn more about St. Michael's Lent. That's exodus90.com/SQPN to join us for St. Michael's Lent starting August 15th. We'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. That's it from us this time. What did you think of The Creed of the Kromon? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch the Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment while also giving us a thumbs up, subscribing, and ringing the bell. I can never remember all three of those. I see it hundreds of times every day when I watch YouTube. Anyway, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the fourth Doctor story, Destiny of the Daleks. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, and I'm so glad that they rescued Charlie from becoming Queen Pulsating, Bloated, Festering, Sweaty, Pus-Filled, Malformed Slug for a Butt.
Me too. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is just to wait.